What's up guys, today we're taking a quick look at the Moonlight kit. This is just a DVR board and the camera. Some people are very confused as to how to get this to work. For me it was very simple. My whole idea of getting this was to make a build as light as possible using this Moonlight kit. So I waited until these were available. I waited a long time to get this and here it is. And I'll show you how I built this. Now I started out with this drone that had the pro camera in here before. So it was just a matter of swapping out the camera. I took the old camera off. And I mean, this thing just comes with literally 2 wires hanging out of it, ground power. You just attach that to your battery lead. I left my VTX wired up the way I had it before. This is a 1S VTX. So I had it wired into the 5 volt. So the VTX is taking 5 volts from the flight controller, and the DVR board is just taking direct battery power. And that's it. And guys, I thought I had to be switching out firmwares and doing all kind of things to get this to work, but it just worked. I have the latest firmware on the VTX as of this recording, and whatever firmware came on the DVR board, I just plugged it in and it just worked. In the kit, you get just very simple things. It's just the DVR board, the camera. Here we have some screws, and here we have the connection. This is for if you're doing the firmware update. And these wires are for the different versions of the VTX. There are quite a few different iterations of the plug, so they all do the same thing, but they're just for if you have whichever VTX you have, you just use the corresponding wire. Literally, this drone is not meant to even crash. If I crash this, it's probably going to explode and never work again. It's weird to say that I don't plan to crash this, but of course I'm going to crash. But you know, this is really built to more or less just test how this setup would work. I don't know if I'm going to keep this like this, probably not, but it's such a great setup, guys. I'm going to show you how this came out. The motors are 6000 kV RC in power. This is 1202 plus, which is 1202.5 basically. I just have my little dipole antenna sticking out here. This is not really done properly, guys. This is literally just like, you know, something I slapped together, but let's go see what this thing does. So guys, this is literally my first flight, and I have to say that I was impressed. I really didn't expect it to be this good. I've flown many cameras, and number one, gyro flow has been sometimes a pain to get right because the gyros tends to drift sometimes and you have to change all these settings. But with the Moonlight kit, everything just works, guys. This is just like dropping it in. I didn't have to sync anything. I didn't have to add points. I already have a preset of how I like my stabilization to look, so that's just default. But everything else, guys, I did not touch anything. I just imported it, and this is what came out. It lines it up. It doesn't go out of sync. This is amazing. It's a really great experience. I know there are many other settings in here where it has its own image stabilization, but I'm not even going to touch that because I just like gyro flow. There's just a lot more you can do with it. So yeah, I'm not going to test that in this video. But guys, also, this does not come with an ND filter, and you know that without ND filters you tend to get lots of vibrations. There's no vibrations in this. This is incredible, and this is probably due to the fact of how I built this, the way the weight is distributed. The camera is very close to the center weight of the VTX, so you know that kind of helps to cancel out. It acts like a flywheel, kind of absorbing the vibrations that are there, but there's nothing. I can't see any vibrations even in the brighter shots. Now you might spot a bit of an oddity, especially with the sky. The way it moves, it tends to like drag. It almost seems like the image is dragging. That has to do with the image noise reduction. By default it was turned on for me. I'm not sure if this is how it comes, or I think that setting was in my VTX because I remember turning that on before with the camera that I had, the pro camera, because there's lots of noise of course at night. But if you do have that noise reduction setting turned on, you're going to get this dragging effect sometimes, and it can be very unpleasant to look at. I eventually turned that off in some of my other videos, and it really looked a lot better. I would suggest using noise reduction in your editing software because of the way gyroflow works. It can mess with the way the image gets stabilized afterwards. So here we're doing some night flying, and this is where the Moonlight really shines. It's really nice to have a 4K system that does so well in low light. A lot of the other cameras that I've used, they all just kind of suck when the light falls off. And I mean, this isn't perfect. And one thing to note is that a lot of other people have also pointed this out, that when you're flying in the goggles, the blacks don't look so dark. You can actually see a lot more through the goggles. And I'm sure in the future they might change. They might give you a option to change the contrast or something to match more what you see in the goggles. But it still looks pretty good. And here you can see that kind of a smearing effect, which is basically the noise reduction working, as the ISO has to gain up a lot more and create more noise. So guys, my intention with this build was to make it as light as possible, and what I wanted to do is open this and see if I could decase the DVR board and just leave the PCB. What I found was that right here there is a ribbon cable holding the SD card reader onto this back plate here. So basically if I took this off, this SD card reader would be flopping about. I have to find a way to fasten it on. So I decided to leave it in here. I basically wanted to show how easy it was to put this thing together. There are a few things that I really want to point out here. Number one is that they give you these screws that are not very long. This is important because if you want to mate this to any VTX, you need something long enough to also go through the VTX. And I mean, I'm using one of these, 1S boards here. If you're using one of those other kits that are also in case like this, you're going to need a bolt that probably goes through two of them. Don't know how you do that. So you kind of have to be a little bit creative in how you're going to mount this. Of course, I use some plastic, which of course isn't ideal. This is going to just pop off if it crashes. But, again, this is just for testing purposes. But yeah, that's one thing I hated. The second thing is, yay, they gave us an SD card, but watch this. You cannot use your finger to get this crap in here. Like, you have to have long nails or probably just get a screwdriver to push this thing in or take it out. So yeah, it's great. We now have an SD card, but why can't I click it in with my finger? That's just really annoying that I still have to pull for another tool to get that thing out of there. I don't know if this is the same case with the regular Moonlight kit with the VTX, or maybe something is just wrong with mine, or maybe they will fix that, or maybe there's a way of taking the same board I showed you. We can take it off and put it closer so that you can actually click it. I have no idea. That's yet to be determined, but that's annoying. And the third thing is heat. This thing gets really hot, and this is a problem with all digital systems. I know this is not a VTX, but it gets so hot. One more thing I don't like is the way it transitions from light to dark. Usually there are cameras that do this in a very smooth way, but for some reason the algorithm in this camera does it in steps. So you can see it like stepping it increases the brightness in steps or decreases the brightness in steps, which is not very nice looking. I'm hoping it's can be fixed with firmware. But this is the reason why you would have to go into the settings and probably fly in a manual mode, which, by the time you set that up, you're going to be overheating. And also, one of the first things you need to know is that when you turn this on for the first time, it's going to be set to more than likely 1080p because you're probably flying in the high frame rate mode like I was using the Dominator or the Goggles X. And on that mode, you're only going to get 1080p. You're going to have to switch to standard frame rate, and then you'll have the option for 2K and 4K, and that's where you want to be. Other than that, guys, I think it's really cool, That's why this does not come with a manual to tell you what to do. It's so straightforward that you really don't need a manual. So the next thing is that you want to make sure that you have your update cable near your update port, which mine is broken because thanks to this stupid connector that Walksnail always made. Yeah, I broke mine, but whatever. I didn't need to update this one right now, but when I do, I will probably catch it in there somehow. That's it, guys. I hope you learned something here. Thanks for watching and happy flying.